The bank alert lit up my phone like a neon bruise, and it said my mother had just withdrawn money from the account I used for diapers, and I stayed quiet while something in me went cold. My name is Harlow. I am 34 years old, and I work as a patient coordinator at a trauma hospital, the kind of job where you learn to speak gently while your hands are shaking. 2 months ago, I woke up in a hospital bed with a chest tube and a throat that tasted like metal, and the first face I saw was not my husband's. It was a night nurse I had never met, standing over my newborn son's bassinet like she belonged there. I tried to lift my head. Pain spiked through my ribs. My voice came out thin. "Where is my baby's father?" The nurse softened her eyes. "He's on a flight. He's been trying to get here since the accident." The word accident floated above me like a warning label. I blinked, trying to stitch together the last memory I had. Rain, headlights, the sound of an impact that did not feel real until my lungs forgot how to work. I swallowed, and my mom. The nurse paused, just long enough to answer without words. "No one from your family has come yet." I stared at the ceiling tiles. Each one had tiny pinholes. I counted them to keep myself from crying, because crying hurt, and I did not have extra breath to waste. Somewhere down the hall, I heard a monitor chirp and then settle back into its rhythm. My baby was somewhere else, in another room, under blue lights, being kept alive by machines and strangers. Strangers showed up. My own mother did not. I asked for my phone. It was cracked, but it turned on. No missed calls. No message that said I'm on my way, nothing. And then I saw the alert again. Another one, and another. Little withdrawals timed like clockwork, as if my pain was just background noise to her routine. For years, I told myself I was helping. I told myself family meant giving until it stopped hurting. But the truth was uglier and simpler. I had been paying to be treated like I did not matter. It started 9 years ago, when I was 25 and still believed hard work automatically turned into love. I had just gotten my first real job and my first real paycheck, and I remember sitting on my couch with a cheap takeout container, feeling proud in the quiet way no one taught me to celebrate out loud. My mother called right then, not texting, not casual, calling, which meant emergency in our house. "Harlow," she said, and I heard the tremble in her breath. "I hate to tell you this, but your father, he got himself into a situation." "What situation?" My stomach knotted before she even answered. She sniffed, soft and dramatic. "He needs a procedure, not life and death, but serious. And insurance is, well, you know how it is. We're behind. The house is at risk." I sat up straighter, suddenly cold. "How much do you need?" There was a beat. The kind of beat where you can almost hear someone deciding how far they can push you. $2,000 a month, she said, as if she were asking me to pass the salt. "Just until we get back on our feet." I did not even ask for paperwork. I did not ask for proof. I did what I always did. I made it my job to fix it. I set up the transfer that night, and when the bank screen asked if I wanted it to repeat, I said yes, because my mother's voice had made the word family sound like a locked door I could only open with money. Before she hung up, she added, "Don't tell your father, he'd be humiliated. This stays between us." That should have been my first warning. The secrecy, the shame, the way she wrapped the request in a ribbon that said, "If you love us, you will carry this alone." But I was young. I wanted to be good. I wanted to be chosen. A week later, my sister Holland posted pictures from a weekend trip, smiling in a new outfit that still had the boutique tag in one shot, and my mother commented with hearts and praise like Holland had invented oxygen. I stared at the post and felt something sour rise in my throat. I almost called my mother and asked, "How are you paying for that if you're about to lose the house?" Almost. Instead, I told myself excuses. Maybe it was a gift. Maybe it was a discount. Maybe I was being cruel for even thinking it. Then I sent another transfer and went back to work. The amount grew the way mold grows, quietly, steadily, feeding on whatever space you give it. 2,000 became 3. 3 became 4. Every increase came with a story, a medication, a repair, a sudden fee. My mother learned exactly which words made my chest tighten. She used them like keys. By the time I met my husband, Beckett, the transfers were so normal that I talked about them the way people talk about rent. Like it was just a fact of life. Like it was never going to end. Beckett noticed. He noticed the way my shoulders tensed whenever my phone lit up with her name. He noticed the way I never bought myself anything without guilt. He noticed the way my mother never asked how I was doing, but always knew what my account could handle. One night, after I fell asleep on the couch with my laptop open, he gently woke me and turned the screen toward me. He had made a spreadsheet, every transfer, every increase, every month. My stomach dropped when I saw the total, not because I could not understand it, because I could. I had just refused to look. "You've been funding their whole life," he said quietly, "and they still talk to you like you owe them." I started to defend my mother out of habit. Then I stopped because something was different in his face. He was not angry at them. He was scared for me. "What happens when we have a baby?" he asked. "When you're exhausted and vulnerable and she asks for more?" I told him I would handle it. I said it the way I always said it, like my own needs were a problem to solve in silence. Then my baby came early, and I ended up with my ribs taped and my lungs fighting to fill, and my husband was across the country on a work trip when it happened. He called my mother. She lived 20 minutes away, 20 minutes. She did not come. And now I was here, staring at a stranger's kind hands as she adjusted my baby's blanket, because kindness, apparently, did not require DNA. I reached for my phone again, my hand shaking. My mother's name sat in my contacts like an old bruise. I opened our message thread. The last thing she had texted me was a reminder about the transfer, not a question about my pregnancy, not a wish for a safe delivery, just a reminder. My thumb hovered over the banking app. My breath caught. The pain in my chest had nothing on the pressure behind my eyes. This was the moment where the old version of me would have stayed quiet and kept paying, just to keep the peace. But the new version of me had a baby in the world, and I could not teach him that love was something you bought. Quick real-life pause. Some nights I'm editing and it gets lonely, and your comments are the only thing that reminds me these stories reach real people. Like, subscribe and tell me your city, state, or country. All right, now let me take you back. Back to that hospital room, back to the way my thumb finally moved. I opened the transfer settings. I stared at the scheduled payments like they were handcuffs. I did not call my mother. I did not argue. I did not warn her. I simply turned them off. One by one, I canceled every automatic transfer. My screen asked if I was sure. I answered yes with a calm I did not feel. Then I set my phone down and waited for the guilt to swallow me the way it always had. It did not. What came instead was quiet. A clean, terrifying quiet. The kind of quiet you hear right before you learn the truth. Less than an hour later, my hospital room door opened, and an older man stepped in with rain on his coat and a folder tucked under his arm like evidence. His eyes landed on me, and they filled instantly, as if he had been holding back tears for years and finally ran out of strength. "Harlow," he said, voice breaking, "I'm sorry it took me this long." My grandfather set the folder on the small hospital table and pulled a chair close to my bed. The vinyl squeaked as he sat. He reached for my hand, careful of the IV, and held it the way he used to when I was little and afraid of thunderstorms. "I came as soon as I heard," he said. "Your husband called me." That alone told me everything. Beckett had not called my mother again. He had gone past her, straight to the person who had always existed on the edges of family stories, dismissed as distant, too busy, too strict. Grandpa Sterling Green had been a probate attorney for most of his life. Quiet, observant, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, people adjusted their posture. "I didn't know you even had his number," I whispered. My throat burned with each word. He gave a sad smile. "I gave it to Beckett months ago. I told him if you ever went quiet in a way that worried him to call me." That made my chest ache in a new place. "You trusted him." "I trusted you," he said gently. "Anyone you chose was worth preparing for." He opened the folder. Inside were printed bank statements. My bank statement. Page after page of transfers highlighted in pale yellow. I stared at them, confused and embarrassed all at once. "You've been watching me." "I've been watching the pattern," he corrected. "I started noticing something years ago. Every time I invited you to dinner, your mother said you were busy. Every time I tried to visit, she said you were overwhelmed. But the money kept moving." My stomach sank. "Why didn't you say anything?" His jaw tightened. "Because I made a mistake once, a long time ago, by staying silent when silence was easier. I promised myself I would not repeat it, but I waited too long again." He sighed. "That's on me." Before I could answer, the door opened again. My father stepped in slowly, like he was afraid the room might reject him. He looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders curved inward, eyes rimmed red. "Harlow," he said, voice shaking, "I'm so sorry." I did not know what to say. My entire childhood lived somewhere between that apology and the man who had never defended me when my mother rewrote reality. Behind him, my mother appeared. She looked put together, hair perfect, lipstick fresh, as if she had come to manage a situation instead of face it. The smell of her perfume filled the room before she spoke. "There you are," she said brightly. "I came as soon as I could." I glanced at the clock on the wall. Hours had passed. I stayed quiet. My grandfather stood. The room shifted instantly. "Linda," he said, voice calm and sharp at the same time. "Sit down." She blinked, surprised by the command, then forced a smile. "Dad, let's not do this here." "This is exactly where we do this," he replied. He picked up the folder and held it between them. "I know about the money." Her face drained of color in stages. "What money?" "The money your daughter sent you every month," he said evenly. "For years, while you told people she was selfish." My mother laughed, a brittle sound. "That is not how it was." My father spoke before she could continue. "It is," his voice cracked. "It is exactly how it was." She turned on him, furious. "You promised you would not say anything." He swallowed. "I promised myself I would stop lying." Silence fell heavy and thick. I felt like I was watching something break that had been cracked for decades. My grandfather laid the papers on the table. "You took advantage of your daughter's loyalty," he said. "You used guilt as leverage and secrecy as a shield." My mother turned to me then, eyes glossy. "Harlow, you know I love you. I was under so much stress." I finally spoke. "You did not come when I was dying." The words landed softly, but they hit hard. She opened her mouth, then closed it. "I canceled the transfers," I added. "All of them." Her breath hitched. "You what?" "I stopped paying," I said. My voice surprised me with its steadiness. "I chose my child." She reached for my hand. I pulled it back. My grandfather nodded once, like a verdict had been confirmed. "Good," he said, "because there is more you should know." He turned to my mother. "You came to me years ago asking me to change my will. You wanted everything directed to Holland." My mother froze. My father looked like he had been slapped. "You told me Harlow had enough," Grandpa continued. "That she did not need support. Tonight proved exactly who needs what." My mother's composure shattered. "You are all overreacting." "No," I said quietly. "We are finally reacting." She stared at me like she did not recognize me. Maybe she did not. The version of me she raised was useful. This one was not. My grandfather closed the folder. "I will handle the rest," he said. "You focus on healing." As they left, my mother tried one last look over her shoulder. I did not return it. That night, alone again, I listened to my baby breathe through a monitor. I felt pain, grief, relief, and something like freedom all tangled together. The truth had finally arrived, and it did not ask permission. The weeks after the hospital blurred together in a way I can only describe as quiet thunder. Everything was calm on the surface, but underneath, old structures were collapsing. My son, Rowan, grew stronger every day. His breathing evened out. The wires disappeared one by one. Each morning, I walked into the neonatal unit and touched his tiny hand, promising him things I had never been promised myself. At home, the silence was different. No constant buzzing of my phone. No anxious checking of my bank account. The money stayed where it was. For the first time in years, my paycheck belonged to my household, not my mother's emergencies. She called, of course she did. At first it was anger disguised as concern, then panic disguised as apologies, then desperation with no costume left. I did not answer. I listened to the voicemails once, then archived them. Beckett watched me closely, never pushing, never rushing. "You do not owe anyone access to you," he reminded me when my hands shook. A month later, my grandfather invited us to his house. He had always lived alone in a tidy place filled with books and quiet confidence. He held Rowan like he had been waiting his entire life for that weight in his arms. "I want you to know what I did," he said later, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "So nothing comes as a shock." He slid an envelope toward me. Inside was a copy of a revised estate plan. I did not touch it at first. "I am not buying your loyalty," he said gently. "I am correcting an imbalance I allowed to grow." My throat tightened. "You do not have to do this." "I do," he replied, "for my own integrity." The plan was simple. Most of his assets would be placed in a trust for Rowan, managed independently until he was an adult. A portion was allocated to me directly, not as a reward, but as acknowledgement. A small amount was set aside for my mother and sister, conditional upon therapy and financial counseling. No exceptions, no loopholes. "She will be furious," I said quietly. "She already is," he replied. "That is not your responsibility." The fallout came fast. My sister sent a message filled with accusations and half-truths. I did not respond. My mother showed up at my door once, unannounced, crying loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. I stayed inside and watched through the window as she realized the performance had no audience. She left without knocking again. The final twist arrived quietly, the way truth often does. My father called one evening after Rowan was asleep. His voice was steadier than I had ever heard it. "I opened my own account," he said. "Your mother does not have access anymore." I closed my eyes. "I am glad." "I also told her I know everything," he continued. "About the money, about the lies." He paused. "I am staying for now, but I am not silent anymore." That was his journey, not mine. I let him have it. Months passed. Rowan laughed for the first time. My chest healed. My sleep deepened. And one afternoon, while organizing old paperwork, I found a handwritten note tucked into a book my grandfather had given me years ago. It was dated the same year I started sending money. It read, "I see what you are carrying. I am watching. When you are ready to stop being strong alone, I will be there." He had known, all along. The final transfer never restarted. The guilt never came back. What replaced it was clarity. I did not destroy my family. I ended a cycle. My son will grow up knowing that love shows up, that care does not come with invoices, and that silence is not the same as peace. I learned too late that survival is not loyalty, but I learned it in time to pass something better forward. The last thing my mother ever said to me was that I would regret choosing myself. She was wrong. Choosing myself is the reason my child will never have to.